Good morning. This is the Great Basin seasonal outlook for August through November of 2022. Let's get started. Take a look at what goes into our decision making and then the final decision product results. So we start off looking at July in terms of temperature, and it was mostly above normal on the left-hand side. You can see here by several degrees, especially northwest uh, Utah into parts of southern Idaho. Precipitation-wise, it was a mix. There's been a trend with a very healthy monsoon of above normal precipitation. You see here about 125 to 150% of normal across parts of eastern, southern Utah and into the Arizona Strip and southern Nevada, even areas of 200 to 400% of normal precipitation. And this has pushed up into some of the mountains of central Nevada, even central western Nevada. The dry deficit precipitation has been pushed up into western Idaho, much of northern Idaho, and far northwest Nevada, and the immediate Sierra front. So it's been a shift in our conditions, and it has been a very early start to the monsoon. The last 2 weeks of June, monsoon started about 2 weeks early. You can see how much above normal precipitation we were in our eastern and southern areas, and that trend has really continued. Another thing we look at, this was a result earlier of the late winter and spring, was um, some cool, showery weather up in far northern Nevada, but especially in parts of southern Idaho and adjacent areas. Very high soil moisture, which has a good correlation to grass crop. And all the reports we've had from fuel specialists out here is the grass crop is well above normal in parts of the central to western Snake River Plain and adjacent lower elevations to middle elevations of the Owahis and far northern or northwest Nevada. But you don't have to go too far south, just towards the I-80 corridor, not even all the way down to it, where it drastically changes to very dry and very minimal grass crop. So this shows where some of the grass crop concerns are and something we're keeping in mind for our outlooks. And before, because of that moisture, the sagebrush moisture was still too high in a lot of areas. But as we see in a lot of areas of western um, Idaho, that sagebrush moisture has finally dropped down to near normal levels, down to near or below 100, which makes it a good part of the fire environment. In parts of far northern or northwestern Nevada, still a little high, still needs another couple of weeks to get down through there. The weather may or may not cooperate on that. We'll talk about that in a few seconds. Currently, our fuels are areas of concern where it has been the driest. It is dry. So up here in what represents the Salmon Chalice area, our PSA number 2, fuels, the ERCs are at record levels beyond the 97th percentile. Very dry, similar for Southwest Idaho, record levels above the 97th percentile, and the Sierra Front. We don't have the normals, but they are right up at record levels. So this is a huge concern. However, there will be some short-term issues with the weather, namely a much more turn to the moist in the next couple of days, maybe the next week or two, that'll hold this back a little bit before we maybe see this come more to fruition. Although we've had extreme fire behavior with a moose fire up in northern Idaho, but we'll take a look at how things are going. So these are fuels. Actually, this is about a month ago, and we were noting how critical, how dry this 5% or lower area of 100-hour fuels was. We noticed a bite taken out of it here as the monsoonal moisture started pushing into parts of eastern Nevada. But here it is a month later, and you can see the monsoonal push has continued to take more bites, and really, especially across the south, has pushed it, chopped in with values of 10 to 20%, basically benign conditions. And that area of 5% or lower has really shrunk to far western Nevada and parts of southwest Idaho. And in and around there, still dry enough for fire, especially you've got some wind going on, but the fuels started to take a little hit, and they're going to take a much bigger hit coming up soon. We'll talk about that. The Evaporator Demand Drought Index, known as the EDDI, also affectionately known as the flash drought. This was a 2-week value. You can see how much more moistening we've had across parts of Utah, eastern Nevada, and how much more rapid drying we've had in far northwest Nevada and into parts of southwest Idaho and even the central mountains of Idaho. The overall large-scale drought condition remains unchanged, and there's a hint towards more modification of it here in the coming months. So that is all what we've looked at what's going on, but what happens from here depends on the weather. We look at the large-scale El Nino, La Nina signal, and nothing has changed there. Still a trend towards getting into, we're in a weak La Nina. Looks like we'll stay there, maybe even poke towards moderate again, very similar to last winter. This is actually going to be through the late summer and fall, and towards the end of the year, start emerging from it back to purely neutral conditions. So what does that mean for us? Here's one big factor. It's a very strong monsoonal push that is ongoing right now on the first of the month. And between August 1st and the 7th, the first week of August, this is projected computer model, or actually a model enhanced with human intervention rainfall amounts. And we see these areas in blue to light blue. This is a 1 to 2 inches of rain across a good portion of the Sierra, stopping right short of Lake Tahoe. But even getting up into eastern Idaho, western Wyoming, and even other areas that don't see the heavy rain, the darker shades of green, it's about a 1/4 to 1/2 inch of rain. And because it's not going to fall in one particular day, but it's going to be on and off the next 5 to 7 days, that's enough to really take a big chunk out of the fire danger in terms of moistening up the fuels. That's one thing we're looking at. But another thing is the 8 to 14 day outlook. So the next 7 days after that, on the right, we are still looking at projections for a very active monsoon, a very active wet pattern for the entire Great Basin, pushing all the way up into central Idaho. At this point, this forced us to make a big change. Those critical fuels that you saw up in parts of Idaho and the Sierra Front, they are going to undergo a dramatic change over the next 10 to 15 days. Afterwards, they'll probably be able to dry out pretty quickly. A lot of this moisture up north and in the far west won't be particularly heavy, just be persistent. Every other day, getting a couple hundredths to 1/10 of an inch of rain, it really takes the edge off the fuels a little bit. The 1 month outlook again shows that strong monsoonal push continuing across the eastern, even central portions of the Great Basin, getting up a little bit into Idaho. And the 3 month outlook from September through November, we do dry out, we do heat up. So the expectation is some of those areas that were at record levels, a 97th percentile, they may drop down, but they could very quickly go back up at the latter half of August into early September and still give us some big concerns. So we put all the pieces together. For August, we've taken out all mention of above normal. The monsoon has taken that out of play, I believe, for most of August, at least the first 2 to 3 weeks. That means 1 week does not a fire month make. So normal all areas. We, again, mostly concerned with the far western areas. I think eastern half of the Great Basin, especially southeastern quadrant, pretty much done. Here's our September outlook. We feel that these areas can bounce back very quickly up here in central Idaho. So this is a concern, as well as the high elevation of the Sierra Front, especially the southern Sierra Front. Northern Sierra Front has a bit more grassland and brush, and there's just not enough of that continuously to go for above normal there. But they'll be drying out as well. So I think in this whole quadrant, this is going to be where the remnants of our fire season is going to continue for the next month and a half to 2 months. October, November, at this point, low skill. This usually represents a time when we get a widespread season-ending event, so we'll leave it normal until we get closer to it and something else changes. This concludes our briefing. Have a great day.